I bet I could figure out a way to fix it. It can't take 16 weeks to make a sofa.
Hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can email me at Max, and you can email me. Sometimes I say email too fast. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 215, the big 215. And today's guest is Edgar Blazona. Edgar is known as the Sofa King. He's a serial entrepreneur in the furniture space, and he is the founder of BenchMade Modern. This episode covers everything from scaling that, selling that, to graffiti and Burning Man, because why not? It is Edgar B. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Edgar Blazona, the Sofa King, who I am so fucking excited to speak to. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But Edgar, the man behind BenchMade Modern, which is he's built and has since sold and has done plenty of things in the furniture and design space, serial entrepreneur. Lots and lots we'll get into today. Thank you so much for joining. How are you doing today?
We're doing good. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Perfect. I with a little hesitation there, I thought you were going to say that you've been dreading this, and I was like, that's probably appropriate because usually where these conversations go. But no, there's so much that you've done in your background. I'm even just reading your bio, I'm fascinated. So really excited to dive into that. Before we get into any of the furniture world, there's a time in your life when you were a high school dropout, and I also know you got into being a graffiti artist. So, everybody's done that same path. No, it's really interesting to think of then and now. Can you give us a little background of kind of the story of that part of your life?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in San Francisco. Before it was like, the big .com era, it was like a gold rush, but before that, it was a real blue collar town. And I grew up there. I kind of grew up in the ghetto. My parents bought and sold houses and rebuilt them and all that. And while I was, in a good school and all that, I was really interested in this other side of the tracks, and I also was an artist, really wanted to be a graphic artist, growing up, and really was starting to study that. And graffiti came along and it mixed this life of, I don't know, rebellious sort of feeling along with art. And I really loved it. And San Francisco, while New York was kind of the leader, San Francisco and LA were kind of, close followers in the graffiti, kind of movement. And it really kind of helped me stay creative as a young, high school and even later on in my life as well. It really played a role. I used to paint for bands. We would go to Lollapalooza and we would, they would hire us to paint all these, broken cars and on the screens. And I painted for this one band called Total Devastation, and on stage kind of thing. And, I walked around like I was like in the band or something, but I was just a graffiti artist. But it was fun. It was fun times.
How does one learn how to graffiti, if that's even how you say it?
Oh my God. Yeah, your style, your letters, like, man, you sit there and you write your name over and over and over again on paper, right? And you're trying to fine tune your craft. And, it's just like any sort of, letter font and all that. You are creating your own style, and there's rules, right? You can't copy everyone else. You got to have your own style, your own thing. And I was always into being the king of height, right? Blaze was my name, and Blaze, the king of height, right? And so that king mantra, that whole, graffiti artists love to call themselves king, right? Which is, I'm the king of the subways, or I'm the king of the bus yards, right? And so I was the king of height, meaning I would paint on top of the highest places, you'd find my work. And that kind of carried over into my sofa world. I really do. I'm the sofa king, and that's all straight up comes from my graffiti days and that era in time.
So I'm always amazed, and you've seen in different parts of the world. Like I remember I was visiting Berlin, and obviously Berlin is one of the most famous graffiti towns of all
Yeah,
time
sure.
in the world. And there are some hotels and high-rise buildings there that you'll look up, and there's stuff like 20, 30, 40 floors off the ground on the side of the buildings. There's graffiti up there, and like, my friends and I were just like, how is somebody even up there?
Yeah.
So for you, what's some secret sauce behind you being the king of height?
Yeah, I mean, back then, this was early on, right? People weren't painting like that yet, and I would use window washer, apparatus, ropes and pulley systems, and I would drop down on a window washer type setup, or I would pull myself up on a window washer setup. I may or may not have, borrowed a cherry picker, in my life, a man lift, right? Things like that. You would climb, you'd find these pipes, you'd look around, you'd find these pipes, and you'd scale these buildings using these pipes to get up to the top. Thank God the bolts that are holding the pipe to the wall don't break off, but you'd put a lot of trust in the work of others, to get up that roof.
I love the may have borrowed ness of a cherry picker. I may have borrowed lots of things. No, but did you ever get caught in the act of graffitiing?
I didn't, and I did. Well, I guess once I sort of got caught, but I would run. So I had a nickname, Skinny Fat. I was kind of the fat kid that could run from the cops like the skinny kids, and I would go for the rooftops again. I would climb things, and I would get over things. I would jump right off a rooftop. You would never catch me. There'll be no cop that will ever jump off a rooftop like I would, and I could get away. And so I kind of had this weird little nickname, Skinny Fat. And again, and even in my sofa business, you'll see that name gets carried over. Even in my DJ name is, Skinny Fat. So I kind of, I love those things going back to our childhood. I think that those are the things that start to push us into business. And in fact, on this same graffiti front, I started a company called Graffiti Graphics. I wasn't that great of a graffiti artist, but I hung out, my crew, were all good graffiti artists. And so I started this little business, and I figured out how to kind of monetize, my graffiti friends. And I would go to these, stores and clubs and big concert venues, and I would pitch, our company. And I would say, you pay us in paint and, a little bit of cash, and we'll do these big, amazing murals for you. And it's a big step for them. They're looking at these, kind of punk ass kids, and they're trying to figure out like, okay. And, I would have to use my sales technique to do that. And that was, early on was, I was the little entrepreneur in that world.
What was your best lesson you learned as that first little skinny fat entrepreneur?
What was my best lesson? I mean, gosh, probably, I'll tell you what, when I was hired by the city to paint all these skateboard ramps, I would actually paint the ramps. But little not known to them is I would sell the ramp space to the skateboard company. So I would then take the ramp space, and I'd go to the skateboard company and say, I'll do your logo or whatever on these ramps in exchange for clothing or skateboards or, whatever I could get out of the company. And what I learned was that there was a press article. It was my first real press experience. This, reporter just milked me for all the information, all the bad shit I've ever done in my life. I told this reporter, and it came out.
Wait, this sounds a lot like this interview.
Yeah, it's like feeling like this, right? And it came out in this illegal. I'm a little bit smarter now. I won't tell you the real illegal stuff, But I told this guy that, and suddenly, this 2-page huge article came out about me, and all, I kind of spilled the beans on so much, and then the mayor was, I couldn't do the skateboard contest. The cops were at the skateboard contest, waiting for me and all this. So what I learned was, be careful with the press.
And so we're going to continue being careful in this interview and make sure we all don't go to prison. But no, let's get to the BenchMade modern story. So this is a super cruel, super cruel. I do that sometimes. There's nothing cruel about this business, but I just made it cruel. A super cool furniture business that you started from nothing, totally differentiated, stood out, had a great run with, and have since sold to American Leather. And there's, I mean, we could do separate interviews on all the entrepreneurship stuff you've done, but I think to highlight on BenchMade Modern, what is it that got you into the furniture space in the first place?
Well, in high school, I was living on my own, and I had a small apartment. I had no furniture, and I realized, man, I maybe I could make something. And so I made a piece of furniture, a table and chairs. I ended up selling it in a gallery that, I just finished it in this gallery. I was talking to this gallery owner. He said, well, we could sell something like that. Why don't you show us what it is? And, I gave him a Polaroid, right? That's how long ago this was. I gave him a Polaroid and showed him what I made. And that was a Friday. I gave it to him. And by Monday it had sold, and I got $400. And it seemed like so much cash, right? It was like, I was rich, this is my payday. And so I've been in furniture ever since. And so that's just kind of how it happened. It just started off with needing money, and it turned into a business. And I later dropped out of high school to pursue it. And I just little by little, I started making custom furniture. I was slinging furniture out on the streets, in front of the bars at late at night, trying to sell whatever I made and kind of hustle, but hustle it in a different way. Take a product that is not used to being sold by a little punk ass and put it into play a little bit differently, and that grew from there.
So you were a little punk ass, but you were creating stuff that was putting a lot of little punk asses in comfortable seats. So
Yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah.
But so you gravitated towards this furniture space. Did you have any inclination at that time of, this is going well, I want to turn this into like a big business and actually, devote so much of my life to it?
A quick little side note is, I started, I had a business, I had 3 employees, and I realized it's going to be a long way for me to, really make this into a big thing, to get that dream house that I always had, envisioned or whatever. So I shut that business down. I went to work for Pottery Barn to learn, right? And I maneuvered my way through Pottery Barn, trying to show them how I could fix problems. But in reality, what I was really trying to do was get into places where I could learn, see what real factories were. And then fast forward, 10 years, something like that, I started a little modernist brand. And then fast forward, that was called True Modern. And then fast forward to there, that I figured out if I sold at retail directly to the consumer, right? I mean, pre-DTC, right? Directly to the consumer, gosh, I could cut out the wholesale markup and I could do so much better. And then if I could find a product where I didn't have to inventory it, I didn't have to have a warehouse. And I had gotten stung in 2008. I had 2 warehouses filled with products, and everything crashed. And I had all this rent costs, of these warehouses, and nothing was selling and all that. But this is a bad business model. And so if I could come up with a business plan that I didn't have to hold inventory, what could it be? And I found sofas, and I found these things. I was like, they're kind of custom made, but if I could just figure out how to make them faster, and I got so sick of going to these dinner parties and hearing like, well, I bought a sofa at, blah, blah, blah retailer, and, it took 16 weeks, and, I bought it in red. I don't even like red anymore, whatever that was. I would hear this constantly. And so I thought, God, I should fix that. I bet I could figure out a way to fix it. It can't take 16 weeks to make a sofa. So there's something broken, and that's what I set out to fix. And so that was the disruption, right? That was the thing that I was going to disrupt, right? I was going to disrupt the American leathers, right? I was going to do it in custom, by the inch, made in 24 hours, right? How could I do that? That would be amazing. And that's what I set out to do.
You're probably going to, drop off this interview right now, but the one little anecdote that I've experienced recently from about sofas taking forever to get delivered was a couple years back when my wife, my lovely, beautiful wife, and I moved into our apartment building. Our Wi-Fi wasn't set up yet, so like the first couple of days I had to chill and work from the lounge in that apartment building, and I met another couple that moved in at the same time. They were in the same situation. And, fortunately we had all our furniture, and, big shout out to our families for providing a lot of that. But this other couple had ordered a couch, and they're like, yeah, our couch still isn't here yet. And we would occasionally see them in the hallways for months after that. And like 3 months after, I would be like, oh, how you guys doing? How's your place? And they'd be like, oh, it's good overall, except our couch still hasn't been delivered. And it turned into months and months. And they ended up moving out after a year. So probably a quarter to a third of their entire lease duration, they were without a couch in their living room. So you're doing some incredible work there. But so the shipping time, the customization, direct to consumer, those aspects, those are huge differentiators there. What did you do to really bring those to the attention of customers of saying, hey, we're BenchMade Modern, we're different than, XXX sofa company?
Yeah. When we launched, I tried to figure out how long would it take, right? First of all, can I make a sofa that's custom by the inch, right? Why are we choosing a sofa that fits better in the truck, right? That's really what it's all about. An 85-inch sofa fits great in the truck. It ships cheap. It goes upright. It fits through the doors, all that. Why are we doing that, right? Do we allow people to have other options, right? So by the inch became a differentiator. And then my second differentiator was, made in as little as 24 hours. And so you could pay, I think it was $200. I think it went to $400 later, but it started out as $200 difference. You could have this sofa custom made in 24 hours. So how did I do that, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, how could you do that? I just moved it to the front of the line. Hello, right? Like, no big deal. People do that in big factories all the time. But instead of like hiding that, I made a big deal about that. And so, it takes us 6 hours, 8 hours, maybe 8 hours, 6 hours to make a sofa, right? Even a sectional sofa. So, and that's just not us. That's most, reasonable size factories, right? And so why do we wait in this line? Like, that was my hack, right? That was my disruption. And the reason why we wait in the line, in case you're wondering, is there's just a line out the door, right? And on top of that, when they sold the sofa, they didn't know if they had red fabric. Going back to that red fabric thing, they didn't know if they had red fabric. In fact, they probably didn't have red fabric, and they had to order red fabric, and that was going to take 6 weeks to get from the mill. So how about this? Let's not sell a sofa in red fabric unless we have it, right? Another crazy hack, right? And so that's what I try to do, and that was our real differentiator. And interestingly, right, it turns out the 24-hour thing didn't work. And you know why? It's because people think, well, if Restoration Hardware makes sofas and it takes 6 weeks to 6 months, then how good could a sofa be at BenchMade Modern that only took 6 hours? And I can tell you, I've worked at Restoration Hardware. I can tell you the same factories are making those sofas in 4 to 6 hours, right? And so it's just how they lay it up and how they stack the line. And I felt like I should, use what I could to differentiate myself.
It's like the when something is priced so well that it seems too good to be true, and then you're like, wait, something's got to be wrong here. That's the same thing applied.
Yes.
From a timing sense.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that you obviously you weren't doing, as it went on, you weren't doing 24 hours all the time, but being able to deliver something in weeks instead of months and not have like the disappointment of, oh, we don't have that color, like that's a huge benefit, especially for sofas, something that people use, it's one of the most used things in their entire home.
Well, it is. And they find themselves, getting attached. And so, part of our process was really to attach the customer, right? Was to take them down this journey. And so, I'd send them out this box of swatches, right? And they'd fall in love with it. I'd ask them, I'd get on video calls, and I'd say, okay, spill some wine on it, rub it on your dog, like do all these things oh, this works great for me. Rub, what do you eat? What does your kid eat? Oh, my kid eats, hot dogs with ketchup. Okay, put some ketchup on it, see how it works. And then I would later on, I sent out these full scale drawings. So if it was going to be custom, I didn't think augmented reality really was a very good trick. It doesn't look good. It doesn't work well. You can kind of envision it, but I would send out these paper drawings, full scale paper drawings you lay out on the floor and see if it fits in your room. See if your husband can lay down in between the arms, all those things that made this difference. And what I was really doing, all of that was designed around, attaching the customer, right? Getting that customer interested in the experience, right? Making the experience fun. It shouldn't suck, to buy a sofa, right? It shouldn't be this daunting thing that you have to go through, like paying your taxes or something like that. It should be fun, And so I was really working on that. And even at the end, you'd buy the sofa and you'd get a link and you'd, okay, boom, now your sofa's in sewing, right? Do you know how much thread this sewer sews in a year? All that stuff. And, so-and-so's sewing it. And then, oh, it's in framing, and oh, it's in upholstery. And then at the very end of the line, and these were real clicks, like this was live, like you would get this thing on your phone in an app. And at the very end, I put a GPS tracker on the sofa. And then you'd watch your sofa drive across the country like an Uber car, right? All the way to your house, right? And it was this fun process. And hopefully you sent that tracker back. Most people didn't. I'd have to call them. I'd be like, hey, by the way, I noticed the tracker's in your living room still. Or, driving around Chicago, do you mind just actually putting that in the mailbox for me, would you? And people think I'm like, big brother kind of thing. But I was just trying to get the tracker back. So all of that stuff was designed around making the experience fun and try to get away from that, dinner table discussion about how much it sucks.
Besides those, as you almost said, differentiators, which I think is the new term for custom by the inch, and those aspects that just make the customer experience so much better. What can you point to that has allowed the company to grow so much over the years to the point that it's now been acquired?
I would always say, let's take a look under the hood, right? While all that stuff is fun, right? So your customers become your best brand advocates, right? I would tell my team, we can take actually, a shitty situation, right? A real struggle, and where the customer is so mad and angry and, oh my God, they scratched my door and they broke my thing and whatever. You can take that moment and you can flip that on them and you can make them so happy that they are become a brand advocate. And they're actually the ones out there selling your sofa for you, right? And so we would just pound on that, pound on that whole thing, turn the customer into a brand advocate, right? And so that really helped. I also think that one of the things that helps is we put the best materials, so it's quote unquote under the hood, right? So, why skimp out on, $30 worth of materials and foam to buy a cheaper foam? Why not put the best foam, pay the $30 and never hear back from them ever again, right? Never hear this like, hey, my sofa's broken down, right? Like, why not just spend a little bit extra money and make sure that stuff doesn't come back? And so in the beginning, that was our whole thing, right? Like, let's just make great sofas. And we got some great press. The New York Times Wirecutter voted us best sofa, best online sofa 2 years in a row. They had to change the category, so we wouldn't win again, basically. And so it was all about really just being the best that we possibly could be, and not in a cheesy way, like real, like actually real stuff, put good materials, be nice to people. Like, how hard is that, and it turns out it's really hard actually for a bunch of companies, but it certainly helped us grow.
How would you characterize the process of selling the company to American Leather?
Oh my God. First of all, I mean, if you are a startup founder, and I actually went back to some of our investors and I said, look, if you're going to invest in startups, the best advice that you can give them is a folder system of how to keep documents. And if that folder is empty, like, that there's a document that needs to go in there, because when you sell the company, right, the process of selling the company, man, I forget the fancy word they use, Gosh, the process to sell the company, when they look into your company, they're like, oh, well, where's this paper? And oh, where's this paper? And dude, you made those papers, you made those documents when you very first started, when it was just you. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, things are flying past you at 1,000 miles an hour. Who knows? It's in my email somewhere. Well, which email? Did I even have the right email address at the time that I could even search now? All of those things. And so when I think about that, I think, gosh, an American due diligence. That's the word.
I was just gonna, yeah, exactly. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
when they do that stuff, it's like they dig in so deep. And honestly, if you don't have that stuff organized and organized well, selling your company can be very, very difficult. Needless to say, I was not very organized. I'm a way better artist and designer and entrepreneur than I am, paper organizer and Excel spreadsheet operator.
Oh, that's incredible. We've heard that from several guests. If you think you have enough documented to sell your business, you're probably not even close, because there's so much, companies that are obviously, prepared to make a huge purchase like this. Don't take these things lightly.
No.
You really have to have everything tied up. But fortunately, even if you forget the term due diligence, it's okay.
They not only did they have that, in our case, they had two different teams of due diligence. I mean, they spent, probably a couple 100,000 in acquisition, right? And at the time we were just this little company, and I'm just this little dude, and like all that, and they've got these teams of people, and I'm going, I don't even know what that is, and no, we don't have that, and kind of take it or leave it. We're doing cool things over here, but we are a startup, and that's a very different thing than acquiring a really well run, well built, business has been there for a while.
Right, but your business is arguably the most comfortable one out there, so you had that going for you. Obviously, you had a huge, successful run with BenchMade Modern. But if you could do one thing differently, going back from start of company to selling it, what would that main thing be?
Gosh, that's a great question. What would that main thing be if I could do something differently? I think I would have gotten on the sale train a lot earlier. I watched some of my competitors. I had this general feeling that I didn't want to become Banana Republic, right? Remember when Banana Republic everything was on sale, 50% off basically every day, every weekend, and it just really cheapened everything about their brand. And so I really fought that for a long time, to not become this sale brand. Now, that said, the world has changed, and the world doesn't buy things unless it's on sale. I go back to my first job ever at Pottery Barn, big corporate job. And I remember realizing, I thought companies put things on sale as a way to give back. Like, okay, we have this, dining table and chairs. It's on sale. You can come in and buy it, take an extra 20% off or 40% off, great customer. Lo and behold, it's because they have extra inventory of it. It didn't sell in the first place, and they're just trying to get rid of it. Nowadays, things have changed in the sense that we don't buy things online unless it's on sale or unless we have a coupon code or something like that. It's very rare that you're making these purchases without at least searching for those things, right? So I was late to that game, and I watched some of my competitors grow while I didn't grow as fast because I didn't get on that sale train. I should have just jacked my prices up and then dropped 20% off on the sale, had the same, outcome at the end, but I would have sold a lot more sofas and people would have felt like they got a much better deal. Isn't that the dirty? I mean, honestly, like that's the retail dirty 101. That when you hear that,
It's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah, no, but I mean, so many this happens in the CPG world as well. Yes, like often it is when there's excess inventory when the sale happens, but also like when you're looking at it from a pure financial lens, like the executives are all upset every time you do a sale because it's like, yeah, we're selling more, but like we should be making full price on these products. It's like there's a reason that, something went wrong that caused this in the first place. But yeah, it's crazy that under the hood of the industry is fascinating. If you want to get under the hood of the Wild Business Growth podcast and also learn some podcast production tips, podcast hosting, podcast interviewing, podcast marketing tips, I could go on and on and on. Your place to do so is the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. You can sign up there at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. It is your place for behind the scenes of the Wild Business Growth podcast, plus podcast production tips and some puns as well. I apologize in advance. There is nothing I can do about that. Now, let's get to some slump busting, because who doesn't love a good slump buster? So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to you more as a person and what you do to stay creative, what you do to stay inspired. You're obviously a super creative person, and you have the whole kind of artistic and design side to you, in addition to the whole, business owner and startup side to you. You personally, though, outside of work, what are your favorite ways to stay creative and keep your mind fresh?
What are my favorite ways? I mean, I can say that, during COVID, I went through what I called a COVID slump, right? And I wasn't creative. I was struggling to be creative, and even early on, and before Zoom became a big thing, I found pleasure in video chatting with people. We are involved in Burning Man and music collectives and all that sort of thing, and we started playing these raves, right? And we would do them on Google Meet and that sort of thing, and Zoom, before Zoom was even what it has become. And I found early on it was exhilarating. It was exciting to see people's faces and interact, and so I started doing much more of that, even with my business. And then even after that kind of faded, this thing I called COVID slump happened, and I lost my design creativity. And so what did I do? I drove around Oakland, California, and I started looking at graffiti again. I started photographing it. I started looking at architecture again. Restaurants have a really good way. They come and go so quickly that they can be, from an architectural standpoint, very on trend or the next trend. And so when you look at restaurants, you can see these cool things happening. So I was photographing that, and that sort of thing inspired me, and it got me back to my roots a little bit, and it also kind of inspired me with this new, architectural design feel, and it helped propel me back to being that creative person again, and got me out of my COVID slump.
That's awesome. It's like back to how it all started with the graffiti.
Yeah.
And sometimes just seeing new designs and being exposed to that can be creative in itself, but also the fact that you photographed that, like you were applying a form of the arts to looking at other form of the arts. So it's all that's a creative explosion there. It's a good slump buster.
It's a good slump buster, right? And it was very inspiring, and it was inspiring to go back to my roots. And you're right, and a little bit illegal, climbing on some rooftops to see some cool stuff and all that. And I, of course, kind of love that still.
And I know you have, you alluded to it with Burning Man, and even before we hopped on this interview, off the record, you were testing something from the DJ standpoint. But you have a passion for DJing and the whole music world. How did that come about?
Well, I've been going to Burning Man for 23 years now. 23 out of 25, and the music changed out there. I'm such a control freak with trying to control the experience, right? And so we would go out there, relatively small camp. We'd go out there and we wouldn't have good music. We'd have shitty music, and we'd spend all night riding back and forth to some blinky thing, 3 miles away, and we'd get there and there'd be more shitty music, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to play good music, right? And I'm gonna figure out how to take our experience and fine tune it and really kind of turn those little dials. And suddenly, I could learn to DJ, and then I got a little bit better, and now suddenly I'm the DJ. And I didn't necessarily set out to be the DJ, but it's a craft that I really looked up to, and it's hard. It's so hard. It's very hard to be a DJ. It's very hard to keep people dancing, and it's very hard not to mess up on the dials. When one song is counting down, 5, 4, 3, and you're going, oh my God, I got to get a new song in there, and it's almost like a panic attack. So I tackled that, and now I'm a pretty good DJ. I'll have to say, you go to Skinny Fat on SoundCloud and see me there.
Perfect. And that name never gets old. I
It
think
never
Skinny
gets
Fat
old.
is tremendous. Who was influential for you in learning how to DJ? Like, did you learn via like YouTube videos or by listening to records, or like how'd you do that?
No, I learned from from our Burning Man community. There's a group out here called the Space Cowboys, and man, they were really really good. And we've been following them around forever, and some of their DJs I've become friends with, and one in particular kind of took me under her wing and showed me a thing or two. She's really good. Her name is Shuey. And she's this great little DJ that just like crushes it. And it's exciting. I played my kid's rave. I got a kid in college, and this last weekend, Claremont McKenna, right? He had a dorm rave. He asked the old man to come down and play for the dorm rave.
Hey, what? I don't know what old man you're talking about. You're very young.
Well, I'm old, and I went down there, and I'm setting up, again, I'm on the stage, and there's these kids everywhere, and they're jumping and screaming, and I frankly, I mean, there was a lot of people at that party, but I came there and I crushed it, and it's fun to see the old man teaching the younger guys that I can still do it, I still got it. Yep.
So, speaking of old man DJs in dorm rooms, let's get to a segment called The Unusual. So this is, pet peeves, quirks, weird talents. Obviously, you have loads and loads of weird talents. Let's start with quirks. What's something a little bit quirky about your personality that maybe your kids, family, friends, coworkers, somebody calls you out for? It's a little quirky, but it's who you are.
Yeah, it's called a sofa, not a couch. I make sofas,
I was
not
gonna say,
couches.
I noticed that I mentioned couch maybe a time or two early in this interview, and then I noticed that you always refer to him as sofa, and I thought, wow, maybe sofa is much more classy.
Yeah, right. Right. And I learned that the hard way too. I went to my first factory. And so this is interesting. You might find this interesting. When I was in the modern kids furniture business, true modern, I tried to get into sofas, right? I started to go out all these factories and try to convince them to make my product. And they would all say to me, well, you're not in the sofa business. Come back when you're in the sofa business, right? So I found a guy finally to make me sofas at retail. Let's call it $2,000. So I would buy these sofas for $2,000, my design. Basically, I was having custom sofas made in my design. And then I would sell my custom sofa for the same $2,000. I was making no money, but I did that long enough that it put me in the sofa business, right? So I went to this factory and I'm meeting with this lady, and I'm saying to her, I'd love for you to make my couches. I've been in the couch business for 6 months. You can see all this work online and our reviews and all that. We're the real deal. We would love to get these couches made by you. Every time I would say couches, she would return with, well, we can make your sofas for you, or we'll make that sofa for you in this color, right? Every time it was that clear, like, it's a sofa, right? We don't make couches, it's a sofa. And I picked up on that early on and kind of play with that. So my quirky thing is that my friends, most of them have my sofas, and a lot of them say couches when they quickly correct themselves when they say that. It's kind of become this big joke within our group of, sofas versus couches and all that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Couch King, for explaining that. But no,
Doesn't
no,
have a
I will never say couch again. You hear couch potato, but you never hear sofa potato.
No, you don't hear it. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What other pet peeves do you have? What's something? It could be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the business. Pet peeves, something that it just grinds your gears a little bit that people do out in public, I guess.
Gosh, just grinds there's a whole list of things that grinds my gears a little bit. I think there's something to be said for presenting something like, for instance, when you have a party and you have a potluck party, that sucks, right? There's no control, right? You don't know. Half your friends don't want to do it, so they end up going to Whole Foods and get some cut fruit or something dumb like that. So you've got 10 kinds of cut fruit, and you've got, one shitty casserole or whatever, right? Like, don't throw a party in that manner, right? Like, control it, like, set the vibe, like, it's this kind of food, and this is how we're going to have it. It's going to come out at these times and all that. So you can fine tune this thing. I love the details. I love the fine little details that no one really can see, that are kind of working behind them, and they walk away going, wow, that was really nice.
No potlucks for Edgar.
Yeah, no
and then
potlucks.
and then besides organizing fantastic dinner parties, what's the weird talent you have that's and I don't mean weird like strange. I mean like a unique true talent. I'm not going to let you say the DJ or graffiti thing because that's obviously you have loads of experience with that. But maybe what's something like around the house or like a party trick or something that you just have a big knack for?
Well, weirdly, I can spit really far. I can I can somehow like curl my tongue.
I just spit water out of my mouth as you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, weirdly, I can spit really far, and it's kind of a weird talent. And in fact, I'll even say to my kid, "Oh yeah, watch this," and I can spit from one side of the street to the other, And how do you do that, Dad? I don't know how I can do that. I guess I learned as a kid. You do that kind of thing. You line up on the street, and you're all standing there. Let's see how far you can spit. Let's see how far you can spit. Such a dude thing. It's funny.
You'd be a phenomenal baseball player, or at least guy hanging around a baseball field. A lot of spitting in
Yes,
baseball.
they're doing that. Yeah, they're doing that.
All right, let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Yep.
All right, let's get wild. So these are all about spit. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So what is one piece of advice for any aspiring DJ out there?
Get on Record Box as quick as possible.
Besides yourself, who is your favorite graffiti artist of all time?
Oh my gosh. Besides myself, who is my favorite graffiti artist of all time? I would have to say Barry McGee Twist.
Barry Twist McGee.
Yes.
I was just hanging out with.
He was in all the famous galleries and museums and all that. Like, talk about a guy who I was around every day, and a surfer in San Francisco, who just made it and was one of the most famous street artists in the world. It's pretty amazing.
As the king of height, what do you think is the highest area that you ever tagged?
Was probably the Bay Bridge, or I used to climb up on the cranes as a kid and tag up there.
Oh my God. I don't have like a serious fear of heights, but I just got like a little spooked out when you said that. Like, man, that's the real deal.
You think about that, it's sketchy, you think like, I think about going back, as I'm hanging on the Golden Gate Bridge on a chain link fence, trying to get around the chain link fence to get to the walkway, and I'm moving my body and trying to fit my feet into the little chain links, and there's death below. I think about my own kids doing that, and oh my God, I can't imagine.
Yeah, you've well, it's a shame you don't really have any interesting stories from your background. 23 out of 25 years ish at Burning Man, which is incredible. I mean, I know so many people would love to do it, just once in their lifetime to experiencing it, but you've experienced it more than probably the founders of Burning Man. What is one thing you must do if you're going to Burning Man for the first time?
Gosh, one thing you must do. I mean, that is such an open-ended question.
This is not an easy one.
I would say, participate. Find ways to participate. Do not be a spectator. Do not be a gawker. Get in there and play along with people. A lot of what Burning Man is and was about creating these, fake things and fake businesses and fake that. You kind of gotta play, and you can't just be stiff. You gotta let yourself play and get involved and have fun.
And a fun one to wrap up. Back when you were truly entrenched in the the sofa business, what is the craziest spill or like destruction to a sofa that you ever heard about from a customer?
Oh man, I mean, we have this 99-day, love it for 99 days or return it, and every now and then you'll get a 99th-day return. Very rarely, but every now and then. And one time we got this sofa back, and it looked like a car had run over it. I mean, it was so worn and just blown out, and all the arms and fabric rolled over, and the cushions. A sofa takes a little bit of maintenance, right? You kind of have to fluff it every now and then. If you sit on a cushion that's upright and you sit on it every time, it's going to be a big U-shaped cushion, and boy, that's what we've gotten. And That is a nope. You just keep that. Let me send you your money back. Thank you very much.
Oh my God. Well, fantastic. Edgar, thank you so much. This has been amazing. So fun connecting with you and hearing all your stories. And now I know how to, I know how to Burning Man. I know how to DJ. I know how to graffiti. No, I'm just kidding. But no, just fascinating background and amazing entrepreneurial story. And there's so much you've done in the entrepreneurship world that we didn't even cover. So really excited to see what you do next. Where is the best place for people if they want to follow or connect with you online?
Either LinkedIn, Edgar Blazona on LinkedIn, or Twitter. I'm relatively available on Twitter as well, Edgar Blazona on Twitter. Those are probably the best two places to interact with me and see what I'm doing next and all that.
Perfect, as well as Burning Man. If you, just don't be a spectator.
If you can find me, feel free.
That would be a fun game. It's like, where's Waldo? Where's Edgar?
I hope you can't find me. This is the last thing I want to know is how you had a problem with your cushion on your sofa at Burning Man. I might just call it a couch at that point.
Oh my God, that's words to live by. And then last thing, final thoughts. It could be a quote, a line, more advice for graffiti, whatever you want. Send us home here.
I think I would bring it back to the business model again, going back to entrepreneurship and even raising money. Ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money, right? And I think that's something we need to remember, right? We need to, when we reach out to other entrepreneurs and investors and all that, ask them for advice. This game is not a short game, right? BenchMade Modern didn't take, 1 year to make it. Facebook didn't take 1 year to make it. All these companies, you think that just made it, right? And you think you're going to make it in, 5 minutes. It takes a long time. So play the long ball game. I think that's really what it is.
Just dig the long ball. Thank you so much, Edgar, for coming on the podcast, sharing your story. The hybrid of graffiti DJing at Burning Man while also doing awesome stuff in the furniture space. That's that pretty much describes everybody, right? And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also maybe try some graffiti. No, just kidding. Try out a couch with them. They're very comfortable. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are fantastic podcasts and podcast recommendations. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That's at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Who would have thought? Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!